I asked this favor in the previous session that I had, and I'm asking again. So if you were there, you already know what the favor is. It's twofold. First of all, if I speak too fast, if you do not understand what I'm saying, if you have any questions, it is your job to stop, raise your hand, interrupt, and not be shy, because I do not know what's in your brain. So you have to commit yourself to doing that for me. Can I get that commitment? Excellent. Okay, so that's my main favor to ask. I also have another favor, which is that I want a timekeeper that will tell me when half an hour has passed. You can do that? Okay, try not to sleep, tell me half an hour, and then if I can get one more volunteer, okay? This is not a big job, but it's an important one. I have some materials, particularly from the previous workshop, but they're good for this one as well. I had them on the table there, and 2.5 people came and picked them up. Thank you for those 2.5 people, but there's more people here. So I want one volunteer to come here at the front, take some of these materials, and actually distribute them now when we start. There's 3 things. I'm going to explain what they are, and they can be distributed, and I do appreciate it. 2 of the materials, thank you, it is 3 things. 2 of the materials are actually materials that we used at the Presbyterian General Assembly, and they are about divestment from companies that profit from the Israeli occupation. They are the colored ones. And then we also have this other material, black and white, and this is from our campaign, A Jewish Voice for Peace, which is asking the largest retirement fund in the United States, the IAA, CREF, to divest from companies that profit from the Israeli occupation, and you have some of the evil companies on this side that you can see what they do, etc. So this is not the topic of this presentation, but it's good reading material when you're waiting for your bus, train, airplane, etc. So let's get on with the presentation. So how do we know what are the 5 steps that are used to undermine the Israel-Palestine justice movement? We are very lucky in that we didn't have to do a lot of investigation on what these 5 steps are. There is a think tank in Israel called the Reut Institute. Reut means to watch, to see, vision. And that institute advises the Israeli government about policy issues that are upcoming. They meet once a year and they produce a lot of policy papers. And they actually produce all of the information from us. They actually produce, if you will, a roadmap, if I may use that word, a roadmap on how to oppose Palestine justice in this country and abroad. So we are going to follow their roadmap, and we're going to see what their plans are, because this is not an itsy-bitsy institute. Who has heard the word delegitimization? Okay, so that's a word that the Reut Institute made up. It's not that the word didn't exist before, but they made it up specifically for this context, for the context of Israel-Palestine. They coined the word, they started using it over and over again until now we all are using it, delegitimization, etc. So let's see what they have to say. Hopefully this, yeah, okay. Okay, so the Reut Institute, first of all, started analyzing what are, from their point of view, the biggest threats to the state of Israel. And they figured out that we were now in Israel in a new paradigm. The old paradigm, this is how things used to be, this is how things are now. The old paradigm was that the biggest threat to the state of Israel was, according to the state of Israel, military annihilation, annihilation in the military terrain. The biggest enemies were the other Arab countries. The weapons were military weapons, and the region where Israel needed to defend itself was the Middle East, the Arab countries. This is the old paradigm. The Reut Institute said, no, this is not the right paradigm for the 21st century. What Israel is facing is something totally different. The threat that Israel is facing now is not annihilation, it's not physical annihilation as they would have conceived it, but it's one man, one vote. It's having Israel be a democratic state and not having the same fate as the Soviet Union or South Africa. That's the biggest threat. The terrain is no longer the military terrain, but political, social movements and academia. The enemies are no longer the Arab countries. The biggest enemies of Israel are non-governmental organizations in key global hubs, in key global areas. Non-governmental organizations includes human rights organizations, includes churches, includes others, and of course the BDS movement. The weapons are no longer military weapons, but the weapons are internet, social media, shame and blame, and the regions where Israel needs to defend itself are no longer against the Arab countries, but are in some of these hubs. And they defined which are the hubs of what they call anti-Israel activity: London, the Bay Area, and others. They define, I think, 5 to 7 hubs where most of the activity is taking place. And they figured that if they could cut off these hubs of activity, then they would be able to deal, yes, okay? That they would be able to deal with the Israeli threat. So I want you to see the difference between this part in here, which is a traditional military attack against Israel, and this is a political, social movement attack against Israel. This is how it's conceived by the Reut Institute. Now, if in here Israel has its own military to fight the military terrain, in the new battleground, the military is not enough. These are the new weapons of the State of Israel. There's a number of organizations, some of them are here in the United States. They're Jewish organizations such as the Anti-Defamation League or the Simon Wiesenthal Center, of course the Israeli Consulate Generals, etc. Stand With Us, that is active in many campuses, the Jewish Community Relation Councils, etc. Those are the organizations that are at the battleground defending the State of Israel against the new threats. And there's a new one, which is called the Israel Action Network. The Israel Action Network is a coordinated effort between the Jewish Federations of North America and the JCPA. Okay, at this moment I'm blanking out on the JCPA, on the actual acronym. But the bottom line is that the Israel Action Network is the one that has the $6 million that they can spend to basically quash any divestment measure, any boycott measure, wherever it happens in the country. And they have made a pledge that as soon as they find that there's any BDS measure, that they will send their people within 24 hours to try to counteract it. And they were very active, of course, fighting Presbyterian and Methodist divestment as well. This is the Jewish Federation. The JCPA is the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, but together they are called the Israel Action Network. Yes?
Were they part of the fight against Olympia's co-op? Or was that before?
They were part of it, but also against Olympia's co-op, you had the Israel Consul General, not of New England, but of the West Coast. You also had Stand With Us. So there's a conglomeration of organizations that were involved. Yes. Now, they understand, all of these groups understand that the battleground where they are is what they call the 3 Cs: churches, campuses, and communities. This is where BDS is taking place. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you divest or if you boycott as an individual. We are talking about networks. And these are the 3 networks that they are looking: churches, campuses, and communities. And that's what they're trying to defend. That's what they're trying to basically have as their battleground. They think that what they are building is a big tent, but it's a big tent with walls. A big tent in the sense that they say all Jews are welcome inside, and everyone that's allied with the Jews is welcome inside. So that sounds cute and nice, but there are certain walls that separate who is inside and who is outside. In order to be inside, you have to agree that you are for a 2-state solution, not for a 1-state solution. You have to pledge that you are against BDS. You cannot be part of the BDS movement. You can criticize the State of Israel, but you cannot delegitimize the State of Israel. Now, these 2 verbs are almost the same. It's in the eye of the beholder. If you do something that they don't like, then it's called delegitimization. If they like it, or if they can stand it, even if they don't like it, it's called criticism. But they have this wall, and only if you're part of this wall, you're part of the community, you're with us. If you're part of this, if you're on this side, you are not in the big tent. In reality, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is fairly diverse. Inside of the movement, you have people that are 1-staters, people that are 2-staters, or people that are agnostic in the question of 1-state or 2-state, because the BDS call does not say anything about 1-state, 2-state. It just calls about human rights. In reality, the BDS call or its application is very diverse. There are some people that engage in cultural and academic boycotts. Some people do only settlement boycotts. Some people focus on companies that profit from the Israeli occupation. Some people boycott all Israeli goods. Yes?
If you want us to invest in this, I think you've got to slow down so that we can take notes. I mean, if we just can't keep up with you.
I'm not going to be able. If you want to take notes, I can send you all of this. If you are not understanding it, I will slow down. If you want to take notes, we will not be able to cover this in an hour, even in an hour and a half. And I have 1 hour for this and for questions. Yeah, definitely. Now, in order for me to send you the PDF, I will need your email. Yeah, I don't expect you, this is not a test, I don't expect you to take notes on any of this, to be perfectly clear. But if something is stopping you from understanding, then I should stop and we should explain. But if it's for taking notes, it's going to take forever. I'm in slide, I think, 3 of 20 or something, and I still want to involve you with questions and answers. So I hope that's okay with you. Okay, so the bottom line out of this is that the BDS movement is very diverse. But our opposition, they paint us in a very monolithic way. They say everyone inside of BDS is an anti-Zionist one-stater, which is not true. There's nothing wrong with being in this position, but that does not encompass the whole BDS movement. They say BDS divides communities. And I ask you, what social justice issue does not divide communities? They all do. But at the end of the day, even with the issue of apartheid, we find out that after the issue gets resolved, everyone seems to have been against apartheid. And you wonder, why did it take so many years if everyone was against apartheid always? They, of course, say that the BDS movement is anti-Semitic. They mix criticism of a state, which is the state of Israel, with hatred of Jews. Now, there are 2 separate items. One is criticism of policies of a state. Any state can be criticized. The other one is hatred or bias against Jews as a people. Jews cannot change being Jews. The state of Israel can change its practices. It's totally not the same. But they, of course, mix it all together. And they, of course, say that everyone that is part of the BDS movement is an Israel hater. They have a number of messages, our opposition. They refer to this as a conflict between equals. This is not, and this is important, this is not a matter of an occupation where you have an occupier and an occupied, where the Palestinians and the Israelis are not living under similar circumstances, but this is a war between equals. In the issue of divestment, they are pushing for what is called positive investment. They say divestment is very punitive, so rather than punishing the companies, poor companies, because they need to make money, why don't we invest in the Palestinian economy? Which sounds great, except that there is almost no Palestinian economy to invest in. They have litmus tests. We addressed one of them before, the issue of 2 states. You have to be a 2-stater in order to be inside of the big tent that they present. They also have the litmus test of a Jewish state. They never explain what is a Jewish state. And I always ask that question when someone asks me, what is a Jewish state? Because I can agree with one if I can understand what it is. But they never explain it because in reality, most of the answers are demographic answers. If you push this question, if someone asks you, are you in favor of a Jewish state? Then the way that I handle this issue is, as I said, I ask, what is a Jewish state? If the answer is demographic, if the answer is that it has to be a state where the majority of the population absolutely has to be Jewish, that makes no sense to me, because that's a demographic answer. And I have been, at least in one conference, not a Sabeel conference, thank goodness, where someone was saying, the good news is that the Arabs in Israel are not reproducing as fast. And I was saying, like, I don't know why these are good news. I am a Latino man and I come from California. If someone were to say that about Latinos in California, I would call that racist. So we need to understand what these litmus tests are, and we need to debunk them, or at least have the other person explain what they are. Another thing, and Ali talked about this in his presentation, is that they emphasize hurt feelings over occupation. You can go to a divestment hearing and you will talk about the homes being demolished, what is happening in Palestine. And the other side is not going to defend the home demolitions. They're going to say, I'm Jewish and I'm so hurt by what I'm hearing. I feel so offended. And I saw this in the Berkeley divestment hearings. I saw it elsewhere. And hurt feelings, it's important to recognize hurt feelings. But hurt feelings is not the same as a house being demolished. That should be, I think, fairly obvious. And we should debunk this. They also say that this initiative divides Christians and Jews. And this is a place where many Christians fail, in this item in here. Because as long as you keep the paradigm of Christians and Jews, you are playing that same game and you're in the same frame. First of all, this is not about Christians and Jews, because there is at least one additional population that is missing here, Muslims. There's probably more. But when you keep it as Christians and Jews, you're doing a disservice. That's number one. And number two, the issue that we're discussing is not really about Christians and Jews. We're discussing about human rights violations and the Israeli occupation. This is not about being nicey-nice between Christians and Jews. You can be, as a matter of fact, it's fairly offensive to assume that in order to be friends with Jews, you have to violate human rights. I can guarantee you that you can be friends with Jews without violating human rights. I can promise. Here, you can be my friend. Now, let's go to the 5-step campaign. The first item is branding, okay? There's a number of washings that Israel does, and we have a website called israelilaundry.org, where you can find more information about this, israelilaundry.org, and where you have some of these washings that appear in here. The first one is pink washing, which assumes that because Israel presumably gives rights to LGBT people, to gays and lesbians, particularly if you're Jewish in Israel. The situation certainly is not the same for Palestinians, even those that are Israeli citizens, certainly not for people in the West Bank. But because Israel gives rights to LGBT Jews in Israel, then it must mean that Israel is a liberal democracy. It's a Western country, just like the United States, just like Western Europe. They're just like us, and we're friends. So this is the pink washing. Think about the fact that gay people can serve in the Israeli army way before they could serve in the American army. Isn't this great? Great. But there's no relation to the occupation. Greenwashing, my mother likes to send me these articles via email, telling me, do you know that Israel is the country that plants more trees per capita than any other country in the world? I don't know where these statistics come from, but I answer back and I say, do you know that Israel is the country that uproots more olive trees than any other country in the world? But it's an interesting argument, because what you're trying to do with these two, pinkwashing and greenwashing, you're trying to go to progressive liberal audiences that are markers of progress. You go to the gay people and you say, we are with you. You go to the environmental people, you say, we are with you. And these are markers of progress. These are markers of civilization to prove how civilized, how great Israel is. Blue washing is targeting Jews in particular, is targeting how you cannot build a Jewish identity outside of Israel unless it's connected with 100% support of Israel. And that's patently not true, but that's how it's being built. And then you have all kinds of cultural events. Some of the cultural events are actually quite cute. When you go to a divestment hearing, you will hear the other side saying, well, why do you target Israel when China commits so many human rights violations? What about Tibet? What about China? What, blah, blah, blah. But then if you go to San Francisco this year, you'll see that Israel has actually a whole week of activities, cultural activities of friendship between Israel and China. Why? Because it's nice to have cultural events. They're like soft and nice and cute. But all of this is branding Israel as a civilized Western democracy. The second item, it's as important, it's relationship with elites. You have free trips that are given to Israel, to church and other officials. You have power mapping of communities to understand where the power lays and how to go to the top. You have liberal bloggers that are, again, the markers of what means to be liberal and progressive, so you try to woo them into your side. You go to LGBT leaders through pinkwashing, to editorial boards, film festivals, etc. So there's more in here. I cannot go into detail, but the bottom line is that it's going to the elites. I think that probably what happened with the Episcopalian Church was something very similar. They don't go to the bottom. They start with the elite. They will go to the bishop. they will go to the top, and they will either be nice or they will threaten that relationship. So that's the second strategy. The third strategy is probably the one that you may have heard the most, is the name and shame, McCarthyism. Is smear letters against Sabeel, and there's quite a few of them saying how anti-Semitic Sabeel is. I'm not going to mention all of them. The JCRC, which is the Jewish Community Relations Council, has specific funding guidelines that means that if you support BDS in any fashion, you cannot get funding from the mainstream Jewish community. You have gay and lesbian groups that are banned from having events at the New York City LGBT Center. Now, the New York City LGBT Center should be open to all gays and lesbians, but it is not, because if you support Palestinian rights, you are branded as an extremist, and then you cannot be there. So you have speaker cancellations. Ali Abu Nima was here just a second ago. 2 years ago, he was coming to New Mexico, and there was a heavy pressure to have his talk canceled. I think the head of the Jewish community here compared him to the Ku Klux Klan. And if you heard him just a few minutes ago, I'm sure you can make the comparison and you can see how rightful it was. You have lawfare, which was explained by Ali before, Title VI, which is it's being now tried to use in universities, try to talk about discrimination based on religion, and how you have some American Jews, this is not all, but some American Jews that are claiming that any talk about BDS or any talk about Palestinian rights makes them uncomfortable on campus, and hence it's anti-Semitic. And you have, and I'm going to focus on this a little bit more because it's really recent and it's important, you have the Pamela Geller ads. You may have heard about those. We had them in San Francisco, they're now in New York, in Washington, D.C., probably in other cities as well. The ones that say, in the fight or in the struggle between the civilized man and the savage, choose the civilized man, support Israel, oppose jihad. So those ads that are running in buses in many cities across the country are still part of the same name and shame situation. We can talk more about this. This is a very hot topic right now. But one of the items that I want to highlight in this area in here is that it's very important for you not to fall in what I call the Pamela Geller trap. And the Pamela Geller trap is that if you don't like the ads, and we don't like them, and we oppose them, the last thing that I am asking you to do is to ask for the ads to come down. Because the one thing where we need to be strong is on free speech. Even if we don't like the ads, and they're hideous, they're despicable, you can say so as many times as you want, how horrible they are. Because the moment that we let go of free speech, I can guarantee you that that's going to come and bite us in the behind. Because we are culturally and socially still trying to establish ourselves. So if there's any limit of free speech, believe me, it's going to come to the Palestine Solidarity Movement first. Yes?
Two things. Well, we've learned through doing some ads and other kinds of public media things that opposing something gives it a whole lot more media. I mean, we've gotten some of the best coverage because we put something out in public and would have been ignored except for the uproar against it. And I have a question about the New York City LGBT Center. Is there any public funding that goes into that center, or is it private? How can they do that?
Well, interestingly enough, on the issue of the LGBT Center, they were threatened majorly by someone who happens to be an LGBT pornographer who gives a lot of money to the center, who has connections with Israel, and who said that he was going to not give money. So the funding was connected. I'm not sure if they received money from the city or not. This was a big issue because at the beginning on the LGBT Center, there was a group that was connected with the flotillas and with Gaza, and they wanted to have an event. And they said, no. We are not going to allow you to have an event because you are not an LGBT group, even though they allow other LGBT groups there. Then a separate group that was an LGBT Palestine Solidarity group knocked on the door and said, we are LGBT and we want to have an event, and they were also told no. So it's a complex issue, and I can talk more about it afterwards. On the issue of the ads, certainly, if there are ads in your community, I'm not asking you to be quiet. Please, Do not be quiet. Stand up strongly and vociferously against anti-Arab racism, against Islamophobia. Do it. I mean, use that opportunity to bring your community together. But the one thing that I'm asking is for you not to go against free speech. Okay? And here it is, Islamophobia, which is what we were just talking about. This is the new weapon of those that defend the Israel system, and it's more than just the Israel system, but it's really important, particularly for those that are doing work in churches, as I mentioned, not to ghettoize your work as Christians only or as Christians and Jews. In Jewish Voice for Peace, we are doing a lot of work regarding the Pamela Geller ads. We are doing a lot of work defending things that are obvious and that are not always related to Palestine, such as the right of Muslims to have their own mosques. There is an issue in Detroit now that some Muslims want to build a mosque and the local community is opposed because, lo and behold, these are foreign people and they're all terrorists and they're bad people. So we need to stand up. We need to stand up for those that they do not always speak for themselves. They do speak for themselves, but they need the solidarity of others as well, and that's our job. The fourth item, just to recap, up until now, we mentioned branding, relationship with elites, and McCarthyism, which is the name and shame. The fourth item is intelligence gathering. And really, everything that you do, you should assume that your opposition is doing intelligence and is finding out about it. This applies to this conference as well. Everything that you say, you should assume that will end up in the hands of the opposition. And that includes in the newspapers as well. So you have to think about it and be careful. For example, I'm not going to mention all of the examples, but here, Dan Ming in the New York Times, he published an article in the New York Times, I think 1 or 2 years ago, and it was an article that was called A Jewish Group Makes Waves Locally and Abroad. And it was an article that was describing the rise of Jewish Voice for Peace, the organization for which I work. Great article, New York Times, not bad. But somebody found that in his Flickr account, he had some pictures of him participating in Palestine solidarity demonstrations. Now, wow, isn't that shocking? Okay, it's totally shocking. Why would he do that? Terrible. Well, you can go and look for Dan Ming, New York Times, Palestine, or Israel. Just you can do a Google, and you will find the article in the New York Times. The article now has an editor's note at the top. And the editor's note said that after the article was published, the editorial board of the New York Times found out that Dan Ming had been participating in Palestine solidarity demonstrations. They apologized for that. Had they known that, they would not have given him this article to write. Now, I can guarantee you that they don't check whether someone participates in Israel solidarity demonstrations. All of the writers of the New York Times. But this is an example of intelligence gathering. We had the example of Helen Thomas. If you remember the comments that she made and were in YouTube about, which were actually fairly unfortunate comments. I don't agree with the comments that she made, but that's no reason to destroy her career. She apologized for them, things moved on. But actually, there's quite a few people in politics in the United States that talk openly about ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. That even includes Dick Armey, who at some point was the House Majority Leader for the Republican Party. And he didn't apologize, he didn't get censored, but that's okay because it's just ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. As a matter of fact, the guy that was YouTubing Helen Thomas, he's a rabbi, who actually was filming her, he himself has called for deporting all Palestinians inside of Israel and Palestine and sending to Jordan. But it's okay, because that's a fine comment to make. So we, in our movement, are at a higher level of yes. 2 more minutes for 30? Excellent. So we at the moment, as a movement, have a higher level of scrutiny that the opposition has. So we have a number of things to do here. We have to certainly point out where there are double standards and where there's hypocrisy. But we also have our job to make sure that we are as careful as we need to be. With Human Rights Watch, the person that did the report on Gaza after Cass led was an expert on weapons. And he did all of the report about the phosphorus and about all of the things that happened there. Now, it so happens to be that people found out in his Facebook that as a hobby, this is his personal life, as a hobby, he liked to collect Nazi paraphernalia. Now, you may find that really sad and even deplorable, but that does not affect at all the level of his reporting on the weapons and what happened on Gaza. But it's very easy for the opposition to make the connection and to just throw the person down the tube and to have Human Rights Watch then have to apologize. So in each one of these cases, there's a little bit of name and shame that has happened after some intelligence gathering. Again, I can go through all of the examples. The most important for you, since you are here in the Sabeel conference, is infiltrators and recorders. I was in the Sabeel conference in San Anselmo, in California, and the whole conference from beginning to end was recorded by people from the Jewish Community Relations Council. They took hours and hours and hours of recording, and then they extracted certain quotations from here and there to show in a 4-page document how horrible, anti-Semitic, and monstrous Sabeel is. And you know how horrible, anti-Semitic, and monstrous Sabeel is. But that's what they did. So it is important that you know that even in here, even where we are now, this can be happening right now. Someone at any moment may be recording what you are saying or writing it down and then using it either correctly or incorrectly. That's part of the intelligence gathering. That's number 4. Well, this is the JCPA calling on the Israel, I think it's the Israel-Palestine Mission Network of the Presbyterian Church, just before we were going to engage in our divestment effort at the Presbyterian campaign. They looked, this is one of the examples that appeared before, they looked at the Facebook page of the IPMN, and they found 1 or 2 cartoons. Those cartoons, they called them anti-Semitic. Those cartoons just appeared in the press. Some of them even appeared in the Israeli press. But the IPMN, in order to just quell the attack and to move on, what they ended up doing was they closed their Facebook account because they just couldn't handle the attack at that moment, which was just before they were going to go into a divestment decision. The other item, the last strategy is to drive a wedge between so-called peace groups. So there are some good peace groups and some bad peace groups. And here is, as Bibi Netanyahu would say, where is the red line? Where is the red line? Here is the red line. Okay. Now, that red line is called BDS. If you support BDS, you are below the red line, so you're no good. If you don't support BDS, then you are okay. You're a group that's kosher. Now, it's very important that as part of this strategy, for example, when there was the divestment at the Presbyterian Church, the Israel Action Network didn't send the Zionist Organization of America, which is extremely right-wing, to just defend the Israel cause. They sent J Street and Americans for Peace Now, because they will look for the most liberal group that opposes BDS, the group that is closest to the red line but above it, so that they can criticize, so that when that group stands in front of the microphone, they will say, of course I oppose the occupation. Of course I don't like Bibi Netanyahu, but BDS is wrong. Which is shameful, but this is part of their tactic, is to create that separation. Now, what do we do with all of this? Your best friend is sunlight. Your best friend is knowing what they are doing, exposing what they are doing, and being as transparent as possible. And for each one of the techniques that we have from the opposition, we have to figure out what is our counter tactic, our counter technique. First of all, we base ourselves on democratic values. We base ourselves on values, on things that we hold in common with the rest of the American people. So I'm not going to say that the US is the greatest democracy, but the values are not bad. The application, varies. But if you talk about values, as opposed to talking all the time about the negative things, if you talk about the values that we share, that we have in common, That is one of our larger weapons. Remember when I was showing the first slide, I was saying that one of the things that scares them the most is the one man, one vote. Now, they are also scared of one woman, one vote, but let's just put that aside for a second. But this is the thing, is that we need to expose that. We need to say, what are they scared about? What about democracy is so scary? So we fight back, and as I think you were saying about exposing the Islamophobia of the ads, about making noise about it, you fight back with as much visibility as possible. They have branding, but their branding, what we mentioned, pink washing, green washing, all of those things, their branding is propaganda. It's just trying to cover up the Israeli occupation. So what you do is you uncover it. You expose the branding, and you use as many means of communications as possible to pass your message. Some of them include the mainstream media, but also you create your own media. You create your own videos, you put them in YouTube, you have your own blogs, you have your own petitions, as much as possible to put your message out there. Now, on the issue of the McCarthyism that we were mentioning before, the name and shame, how do you get out of the name and shame? You do it by something that we call activist judo. You use the McCarthy tactics against them, but that doesn't mean that you become a McCarthyist yourself. You rather let them fall on their face. Activist judo, what this means, I do not know anything about judo, so this is what I heard from people that know. Who knows judo here? Okay, good, so I can say this and you'll believe me, good. Okay, part of what you do is you use the energy of your opposition when they are going to fall, so you help them fall. You not even need to push them very far, just help them and they fall, okay? So I'll give you an example. When we were talking again about the issue of Jewish state, or we were talking about any one of the items, you try to get them to talk, get them to expose the racism that they have in what they are saying. They will fall by their own words. Pamela Geller thinks she's so smart because she's putting these ads, but actually, she is being hated by everyone. There's nobody that likes her ads, except for a very small, margin of the population that's irredeemably Islamophobic. But the average person in San Francisco, in New York, in DC, even people that do not agree with us on every item, see the ads and see that they are despicable. Not only that, we have spent a lot of time in the movement trying to figure out how to do outreach to people of color, when we are going to do outreach to people of color. This movement is too white. Well, thank you, Pamela Geller, because the moment that you say, we are against savages, every person of color who knows the meaning of being ever called a savage is coming to our side. So you are using their own words, you are using their own techniques, not to have the same methodology, but to have them fall on their words. It is important, as we mentioned, as important on their side to have Islamophobia as one of their weapons. I already mentioned that it's important for us to be an ally to Muslim Americans who are under heavy attack in the United States. Surely outside of the United States, they are under physical attack in other countries, but in here, there is quite a bit of either local or national campaigns against Muslims, and to aggressively call out racism whenever you see it. Now, the other side cultivates relationships with elites. They try to find who are the people in power that are going to give us what we need. So we need to also do that, but we need to cultivate relationships with the bottom as well. We need to power map our community and speak at churches, mosques, schools, speak with people in power such as commissioners, people that are editorial meetings of newspapers, but also with members of the community at large. So they are playing this game, and they usually play the game behind closed doors. We need to know how to cultivate these relationships behind closed doors and in the open with sunlight. That's the only way that we're going to win this part of the battle. I already mentioned this. But since the other side is engaged in so much intelligence gathering, I urge you to be cautious in what you say, in what you do, in what you post. This does not mean that you have to change your point of view. This does not mean that you do not speak truth to power. Actually, speaking truth to power is the wrong metaphor, because you speak power to power, in my opinion. But this does not mean that you do not speak the truth. It means that you speak the truth in a language that you will be understood and that you will not be misquoted. That's the only thing that I am asking you. I am not asking you to change any one of your positions, just to make sure that you are not being misquoted. This at some point involves language check to make sure that you are understood properly and that you are not going to be misinterpreted. This may include online security to make sure that you're not being hacked. And as I said, you assume that everything that you're saying, this presentation included, everything can go public. Nothing that you say should be secretive or should be something that you should be embarrassed to see in the pages of the New York Times, if need be. As a matter of fact, you should be happy if you see your words in the New York Times or wherever, right? Last, you need to stay connected with Jewish organizations and with other organizations, particularly, well, this is Jewish Voice for Peace, this is us, but these are some organizations, if you remember when we were talking about the wedge between the bad, kind of like the bad peace group versus the good peace group, you need to stay connected. This is not only, there's a heavy emphasis here on the Jewish side, but this is much larger than the Jewish side. Now, what does stay connected mean? Stay connected does not mean that you have to agree with everything that they say. Stay connected means that you need to at least keep everyone true to where they need to be. You need to keep them accountable. So, for example, if I am coming from Jewish Voice for Peace, if we are doing something that doesn't jive with your principles about what justice means, let us know. Let us know. Stay connected with us. But do it also with people that are on the other side of the divide. Let J Street know, let Minutes USA, let American for Peace know, let others know. When they please you, let them know. When they displease you, let them know. Because the only way to close that wedge, to not open the gap further, is to stay connected. So that's the bottom line of my presentation. And I know that I went very fast, and I will give you a copy of this if you want it, but I was going fast just so that I have time for you to ask questions, comments, etc., which you can do now if you so please, and there's a microphone right there.
And can we ask for equal gender participation as well? So if a man speaks, can a woman speak?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Going all over the place. Yeah.
What can you tell us about the Jewish group Bend the Arc?
Bend the Arc is there's a number of social justice Jewish groups that used to exist in the United States, and they came together and they formed this new group, Bend the Arc. The important thing to know about Bend the Arc is that they do very, very good job here domestically, but that they shy away from the issue of Israel-Palestine. And the groups where they were coming from before were doing the same thing. So they will do work on homelessness, they will do work on any number of important social justice issues in this country, on Medicare, on Social Security, etc., but they will shy away from Israel-Palestine. Now, I believe that the work that they do on other areas is excellent, and I totally support it. I believe, I'm not saying that as Jews we have any more responsibility as American Jews than anybody else to deal with this issue. But it's not so much a responsibility as a privilege. As Jews, we have a privilege in that people listen to what we have to say more. People give more weight to our words than they give to other people. So if we have that privilege, we have to use it wisely, and we cannot waste it. Can we, if there's respecting the request, if there's a woman that wants to get to the microphone, that would be great. If not, we'll get the gentleman. Can you go to the microphone? Oh. Can you go to the microphone? It's just
there. Could you go on and say something about how you can try to counteract the sort of elite opinion within the media, because it appears that at the top level there are people who you want to convert. And if, for example, Rachel Maddow's show actually could address some of the issues we're talking about here, that would be a big plus. But the fact that somebody like her doesn't suggests that there's work to be done at the top levels in MSNBC, just as an example.
So there's a lot of work to be done with the media in this country, and it's not only on this issue of Israel-Palestine. We have heavy corporate media that only pays attention to one side of the issues. So there's a number of solutions in here. Clearly, we have to keep on doing battle with the media. I also mentioned creating your own media, creating your own ways of communicating when you cannot get the mainstream media to carry your message. But at the end of the day, up until now, mostly, we have been successful with the media, not always, but mostly, unfortunately, when Israel does something bad. So there was a lot of media attention at the time of the Gaza attack and the like, but we don't have to wait for Israel to commit another atrocity to be on the media. We can create our own media events. We can create our own media opportunities. So for example, it's not only Jewish Voice for Peace, but there were a good number of groups that worked together ahead of the Rachel Corrie verdict in Haifa District Court. We knew when the verdict was happening. We had our press releases together ahead of time. We coordinated our work. We coordinated the spokespeople so that we could be on the media, represented at the right time and at the right place. The same happened with the Presbyterian General Assembly. So there are certain opportunities where you know that the media is going to be there, or you can cause the media to be there. You have to seize those opportunities. Pamela Geller is an example. Pamela Geller is not an opportunity that we were calling for, but since she's there, she's using the media. You know how much she paid for the ads in San Francisco? $5,000. She got a lot of media for those $5,000. A lot of media. We are trying to get our media as well for her $5,000. Anybody else? Yes.
Having been the target of the Republican coalition's ire as the anti-Israel Obama rabbi, that also gave me the opportunity to give 6 interviews in 6 different papers, which I wouldn't have been able to give. So it seems like doing our work in and of itself in the small communities that we live in will bring media attention to us, even if it's negative, and then we can demand our response.
Indeed. Anybody else?
What are the other regions? Yes. What other regions? You mentioned London and the Bay Area. What are the other regions that they're?
Those are the first 2. I think they have they have New York, and they have five or six cities across the world that actually what they are doing, the Reut Institute, is that every year they are producing a report which is intelligence gathering on that region. They already produced one for London, they are producing one for the Bay Area, and I'm not sure where they are going next. But what they are when they are thinking about hubs, they are thinking, remember when we were talking about elites, relationships with elites? They believe, and this is wrong in their side, but they believe that the BDS movement also works with hubs. So they believe, for example, that if they go to the Bay Area and they manage to name and shame 5 or 6 people or 5 or 6 organizations, it's like a snake. You cut off their heads and then they disappear. They do not realize the level of grassroots support that there is for this movement. Yes.
I'm wondering if it might be a good idea to think about class action suits with the against the name and shame programs that they're doing. And I'm thinking about back, I can't remember what year it was, about 1988 or 89. I was one of 19 named defendants in a class action suit against the ADL because they were spying on us and South African activists. ADL caused the death of a South African activist, Chris Hani, because they sent the information back to South Africa. The minute he walked off the plane, he was picked up and executed. And they were giving our names to the police departments. It was really outrageous. And they lost the suit. The ADL lost the suit, and it seems to me it might be worth looking at that. I don't know, it was pretty broadly presented here, but there might be something worth pursuing along those lines.
So we are very lucky that in this movement we have a great team of lawyers, and these are volunteer lawyers with the National Lawyers Guild. And they are the BDS lawyers of the movement. And if you have any issues, then I can give you contacts with the NLG. But if you speak with them, you will hear that one of the first things that they will tell you is that they use the law or the lawsuits defensively. Because at this moment where we are at now, our opposition has, the way that the justice system works in this country is that the bigger your pocket is, the more you can withstand the lawsuits. And our opposition has more money to do that. Now what they are doing, for example, when there's a Veolia campaign going to Los Angeles, Veolia will send a letter to the city council in Los Angeles saying how if the city council does not give a contract to Veolia, they are breaking the law, because there's the anti-boycott law in the United States and all kinds of laws that they mention. In truth is that everything that they mention legally is a lie. It's misleading, but they do mention it. So if you ever are engaged in a BDS campaign and you are faced with legal arguments that say that BDS is illegal in this country, because they will bring those arguments and with very threatening letters from lawyers, then you should go to the NLG and they will provide you with a letter of support. So this is where we are at this moment, and we are much stronger in building a grassroots movement than in building a movement of lawyers at this moment, where this is where we are. Any other questions?
At the end of your slide number 4, in the second section, there was something right at the end that you didn't mention, and I wonder if you could say something about it. It was personal security.
Yeah, so we were talking about being cautious. So personal security, okay? So we need to be aware of the fact that there are crazies and lunatics out there. At least in Jewish Voice for Peace, we have gotten threats. Some of the threats are kind of like cute and you can file them away. But some of them are the kinds of threats where they make sure that you know that they know where you live or that they know where you work. We have gotten one Jewish Voice for Peace member getting a picture of her with her niece and nephew, with her family members, and in a way they're saying, we know who you are, we know how to harm you. So there is no great way to deal with this other than to be courageous. Obviously you have to be careful, obviously, and no one is expecting you to be, kind of like a hero for the cause. You have to be rational and courageous. But one of the things that we do in most of these cases is publicize when we get these threats. Because remember when I was talking about Sunlight? Sunlight works here too. We publicize them, and we actually go to the mainstream organized Jewish community and we tell them, you complain so much about anti-Semitism, here we are being attacked because we are Jews that oppose the Israeli occupation. Are you going to make a statement about it? Where are you on this issue? So that's part of Sunlight as well. Any other questions? Any questions related about any other subject? You don't have to be shy. Yes.
I'm a member of the Amnesty International group in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and we have been working for on several occasions in support of a Palestinian who is held in administrative detention and is considered to be, by Amnesty International, a prisoner of conscience. He has not advocated or used violence. He has spent 2 terms totaling probably about 6 years in administrative detention. We have an action out in the tabling room, which is similar to what we've done on other occasions, inviting people to write postcards to the Israel ambassador. Our thought here is that this would make them be aware that that knowledge of this situation and opposition to it is widespread. Do I assume correctly that this fits in with your advocation of visibility?
Of course, yes. Now, it is important to not only, first of all, yes, 100%. It is important to work not only to have visibility, but to conceive of your work as being part of campaigns. And this will be part for another talk because it's much longer, but I want you to think strategically, and this is not criticism, what you're doing is very strategic, but I want you to think strategically about what issues you take on, how do you make them into campaigns that have a beginning and an end, that have a target, that have a victory point, and that you can build on and move forward. Because sometimes what we do in this movement is we do a lot of educational events that don't always build up, or that we do not see how one stacks on top of the other and gets us someplace. So this would be for another presentation, but I totally encourage you, and this is the beauty of the BDS movement, by the way, is that you start thinking in terms of campaigns. You start thinking in terms of targets, audiences, goals, short-term goals, long-term goals, etc. And the more that you do that, the more that you can conceive of your work as being part of a campaign that's larger than you. It can be a campaign to free this prisoner of conscience. It can be a campaign to have Veolia not have a contract renewed in your city. It can be a campaign against Ahava. There's all kinds of campaigns. The more that you think of yourself as part of a campaign, you are not tackling the whole gamut of injustices in Palestine, but you are helping us make progress in this country because you are moving us from one small victory to another, to another, to another. Yeah.
I can't reach the microphone.
I will repeat your question.
I understand that a contractor or subcontractor building the wall between us and Mexico is related to an Israeli company contracted by Boeing. Is there something about that?
Yes. So the question is whether there is a relation between the companies that are building the illegal wall in the West Bank versus the wall here that separates the United States and Mexico. And there's a number of contractors, there's a number of companies that are involved in that, either in the building of the wall or in the security apparatuses that are around it. You have Hewlett-Packard is involved in the biometrics, you have Elbit is involved, and I'm sure I'm forgetting another company, but those are the two that come to my mind. And these are very important places to build coalition. As a matter of fact, in our campaign, and I didn't talk except for 1 second about our TIAA CREF campaign, where we're asking the largest retirement fund in the United States to divest from companies that profit from the Israeli occupation. We actually got the endorsement of a group called No Más Muertes. And it's a group that stands against the abuses at the border here between the United States and Mexico, and that sees the connection between the wall here and the wall there. It is our job to make those connections. If someone doesn't see the connection between the segregated Veolia buses in the West Bank and the story of Rosa Parks, then we need to explain that connection because it's fairly clear. But we need to do a better job of explaining those visuals, and some of these visuals are very potent as part of our American history, and we can make use of those. I think that sometimes we talk a lot about apartheid, and it's an important subject, and it was mentioned probably before, but sometimes in my mind in this country, the analogy of segregation, of Jim Crow make work better than the analogy of apartheid. So you use whatever works with your audience, but see the connections, make other people see them as well. Any other questions?
This was great.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so if you want to get a copy of the PDF, then you can come and then give me your email and I'll send it to you.